we could see you and now we can't. Let's just launch, and if we have to pick you up more than one or two more times, we'll bring on our panel and try something else.
Okay.
Anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, Cory Doctorow will attempt to speak to us about the war on general purpose computing. Take it, Cory.
Thank you. So let me start by saying that this is not a copyright talk. I do copyright talks all the time, and questions about culture and creativity may be interesting enough, but to be honest, I'm getting heartily sick of them. If you really want to hear freelance writers like me talk about the shifting marketplace for my services and how I may or may not make a living, I've given a million talks on this subject. They're all on YouTube. You can go and find them. Today I want to talk about something broader. I want to talk about general purpose computers, because general purpose computers are astounding. They've been around for more than half a century, and our society is still struggling fairly mightily to figure out what they're for, how to accommodate them, how to cope with them, which unfortunately does bring me back to copyright. I mean, not copyright per se, not who should copy stuff or when stuff should be copied or whether it's good or bad for stuff to be copied, but the general shape of the copyright wars and the lessons that they can teach us about the upcoming fights over the destiny of general purpose computers. So in the beginning of this stuff, we had the packaged software industry and we had sneakernet. Packaged software industry took floppy disks and put them into Ziploc bags or in cardboard boxes, and they stuck them on pegs in shops or like candy bars at the point of sale, or put them on shelves, sold them like magazines. Now, these floppy disks were eminently susceptible to duplication, and so of course they were duplicated very quickly and very widely, and this created great chagrin in software vendors. Which brings me to what I like to call DRM 0.96, the first cut at DRM in the modern age. So the first round of this was to figure out how a program could distinguish whether the media it was on was the original media that was sold by the vendor or a copy of the media that had been made by a customer or by a was they would create these physical defects on the disk themselves. They'd poke a hole sector, or in some other way mar a specific sector. So when you copied the disk, the error correction would just skip over that. When you launched the program, it could check and see whether or not it got an error reading that sector, and if it didn't, it would say, oh, I'm an illicitly made copy. But we also use things like dongles, where you'd have to give up one of your scarce computer ports for a thing that would be harder to copy than the bits on a disk, or a challenge response protocol that required that you maintain physical possession of a large manual that was considered difficult to copy. So every time you wanted to run some piece of very expensive CAD software, it would say, open your manual, turn to page 922, look at the fourth paragraph, and tell me what the third word is there. Now, these failed for two important reasons, and they totally failed. The first, reduce the utility of the software that they bought. It made their backups non-functional because the backup didn't have whatever it was that distinguished a backup from the original. It meant that your scarce ports needed to be sacrificed to authentication dongles, so you might have to decide whether or not you were going to have, like, I don't know, a second floppy disk or a dongle hanging off the back of your computer, allowing you to run something off the first floppy drive. And then there was the inconvenience of transporting those giant manuals. After you spent thousands of dollars, it's a bit of an insult to say, and now you must lug around a suitcase on wheels everywhere you go if you want to use the tiny little floppy we've just sold you. Now, that was the first reason. The second reason is also pretty important, which is that this had no impact on pirates, because pirates, after all, found it trivial to patch the software and bypass all these authentication steps. And the way that works is you get some expert whose access to technology and whose expertise was equivalent to the sophistication of the people who'd actually made the software. And that person would reverse engineer the software and then release cracked versions on floppies that would become widely circulated. They were, they were more fit really than the 4Pay copies. Every time you copied a 4Pay copy, it was like a neuter. It didn't work. Whereas these ones were fecund. And so you know what happens when you introduce neuters and fecund organisms into the same ecosystem. The fecund ones just outbreed them. It's as old as the Bible. So that expertise and that technology probably sounds highly specialized if you're not a technologist. The idea that you would have, sort of crazy debuggers lying around, you'd know how to use them, you'd be able to microanalyze a disk and find where the bad sectors were and so on. But it's not really that specialized. Figuring out what a recalcitrant program is doing and routing around its failures, bread and butter of software engineers, especially in those rough and ready Wild West days when we hadn't yet standardized how programs would operate within a computer. And so they were always clobbering each other. And of course, figuring out what crappy, decay-friendly floppy disks were doing, anything would start to loot bits as soon as you looked at the cross-side. So anti-copying strategies just got more fraught as the network spread. Once you had BBSs and online services, Usenet newsgroups and mailing lists, the expertise of people who figured out how to bypass authentication steps could be just packaged up and passed in a tiny little crack file you could apply to a non-functional backup. Or as the network capacity increased, you just get a whole disk image or an executable that would just spread on its own. So that brings me from the kind of paleo DRM era to the first full-fledged DRMs and DRM 1.0. So by 1996, it was really clear to everyone who was paying attention that something important was about to happen. We were about to have an information economy, whatever that meant. Everyone assumed that it would be an economy based on buying and selling information. Certainly in 1995 on the Hill, when Al Gore was holding the NII hearings and talking about the information superhighway, information economy was often equivocated to an economy buying and selling information. And since information technology makes stuff so efficient, it's kind of magic efficiency fairy dust, think of the markets that we could have opened up with IT. People talked about selling books for a day or the right to watch a movie once for $1, and then you could rent out the pause button at 1 cent per second. You could sell movies for one price in one territory and for another price in another, or even to different customers in the same territory, and so on and so on. These fantasies of the day were a bit like a boring science fiction adaptation of the Old Testament book of Numbers, this kind of tedious enumeration of every permutation of all the things that people did with information and all the ways that they could be charged rent for doing it. But none of that stuff would be possible unless and until you could control how people use their computers and the files that you transfer to them. It was all well and good to talk about selling someone the 24-hour right to watch a video, or the right to move music onto an iPod, but not from the iPod and onto another device. But how the hell would you do that once you'd actually sent the file to someone's computer? In order to make it work, we needed to figure out how to stop computers from running certain programs and from inspecting certain files and processes. For example, we could encrypt the file, we could scramble it, and then we could say, okay, in order to descramble it, you have to run a program that we give you, and that program will only unlock the file under certain circumstances. So, it'll check to see whether or not you have the right at this moment to open the file, either based on some internal network business logic or by asking some server on the network, is this guy legit right now? But there's a saying on the internet, now you've got two problems, as in, I need to automate some business process, I know, I'll hire some consultants, now you've got two problems. So the first problem is, you've got to stop people from copying, and the second problem is, you have to stop the user from saving the file when it's been rendered in the clear, and you have to stop the user from figuring out where that unlocking program is storing its keys, because it has to have the keys to unlock the file, otherwise it couldn't do its job. And once the user finds those keys, she can just decrypt the file, leave it decrypted, leave it unscrambled on her drive, and then throw away your stupid player app, which is probably not as good as the one she prefers to use anyways. So now you've got three problems. You have to stop users who figure out how to render the file in the clear, how to save it without any scrambling, from just sharing that file with other people. And of course, that now you've got four problems, because you've got users who will figure out how to extract the keys from unlocking programs. You have to stop that from telling people, if you look in this part of the program, you will find the keys. And so now you've got five problems, because now you have to stop people who just take
It's actually all on Cory's end. Exactly. It's that shirt.
Hey there.
We lost you right about 5 problems, right about the 5th problem,
Okay.
which
So,
was our
the
6th
fifth-
problem.
Yeah, right. And now we've got 6 problems because we decided to do this over Skype using a BT line. So now we've got 5 problems because now you have to stop users who figure out how to take that key from just telling other people what the key is, because once they have the key, they can write their own players for it. And the keys are a very small blip of information, 128 bits. You'll remember that there was a kid who called himself Mueslick64, a hacker so ferocious he named himself after a breakfast cereal, who figured out how to get the keys out of HD DVD. And AC appeared, this 128-bit number, it appeared, that they had taken pretty readily, because all he did was he said, well, when I'm watching the DVD, somewhere in my computer's memory must be the keys. So I'll just take the first 100. Hey there. So do you want me to try video audio only? Yes. All right. Well, it looks like it's going audio only. Am I audio only as far as you can tell?
Yes, we can decline the video call. No, then we'll be cut off. Just leave it alone. Okay, continue in audio only mode, Cory.
Okie dokie. So back to Mueslick64. So he figured out that somewhere in his computer's memory would be the key for the video he was watching. So he just tried the first 128 bits and then bit 2 through 129 and 3 through 130 and so on until he found it. And having found it and published it, people started to write to him and say, well, do you think you could do that for Blu-ray too? Now, according to him, he'd never seen a Blu-ray player. He never had one. But like Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother, who solved crimes, but even leaving his subterranean lair, he just said, you know, someone send me a RAM dump of a Blu-ray disc while it's playing, and I'll find you that key too. And he did, and he showed it around. So that problem of getting people to not share the key once they've extracted it, that's a very hard problem too. And by 1996, we had a solution. We created the WIPO copyright treaty, and that was passed by the UN World Organization. They made all of the world's copyright treaties until recently, until ACTA and TPP. And they, in this treaty, created laws that made it illegal to extract secrets from these programmed unlocked files. They made it illegal to extract the file itself when the unlocking program is running. They made it illegal to tell people how to extract the secrets from your unlocking program. And they made it illegal to host copyrighted works or cracks or secrets or instructions. And that came with this handy streamlined process that let you remove anything you wanted from the internet without having to mess around with all that, you know, due process stuff where you'd have to convince a judge, you know, by paying a lawyer that you could just send a note and solve. Forever, plus power and prosperity. Anyone who understands how computers and networks work understands that these laws will create more problems than they could possibly solve. After all, there were laws that made it legal to look inside your computer while it was running certain programs. They made it illegal to tell people what you found when you look inside your computer. They made it really easy to censor material that was on the internet without having to prove that any wrongdoing had taken place. In short, they made a series of unrealistic demands on reality, and reality did not oblige them. After all, copying only got easier following the passage of these laws. Copying is only ever going to get easier. I mean, this day, today, May 22nd, 2012, this is as hard as copying will ever get. You know, you will sit around the table at Christmas dinner in 20 years, and your grandchildren will say, tell me again, Grandpa, tell me again, Grandma, of those days when copying was hard in 2012, when you couldn't just go to the Walmart and find hanging in a blister pack at the point of sale in packs of 6 for $1, hard drives that can store all the music ever performed, all the movies ever made, all the songs ever sung, all the words ever written, and so on. Tell me again, back when everybody didn't know the magic incantation, you know, Batman Forever, BitTorrent for Google, just to get a copy of a movie. Tell me again when copying was hard. So reality asserted itself, and we all had a good laugh over all those funny misconceptions that we brought with us into the 21st century. And then we made a lasting peace with equality for all. Of course, not have it or even either. Like the spider to catch a fly and has to swallow a bird to catch the spider and to catch the bird, so too must any regulation that has on the one hand broad general appeal, but on the other is a disaster when it's implemented, beget new regulations that shore up the failings in the old regulation. The problem is we just didn't try hard enough. Now, it's tempting to stop the story here with a bit of kind of beltway cynicism, and we can just say, oh, the problem is that our lawmakers are either clueless or they're evil or evilly clueless. We can just leave it at that. But that's not a very satisfying place to get to, because fundamentally it's a counsel of despair. It says that we can only solve our problems when we eliminate cluelessness and evil from the halls of power, and that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But I have another theory about this. My theory is that the heuristics that regulators use to evaluate experts very well comes to computers and the internet, and I'll explain why and what I mean by that. So we tend to regulate more readily by regulating special purpose devices, because I think we have the sense that a special purpose have features added and removed without doing disfiguring violence to their underlying utility. Think of this, right? If I went
Okay. All right. When Cory comes back, let's thank him for giving it a good old try, and we'll be able to tell our grandchildren, remember when the internet was so flaky you couldn't even do a video call? And then we'll get the panel going, the next panel going a little bit early, and I have a reason for that too. So, so Cory, are you there? No. Okay, what's the question you want to ask him?
Has anybody here read Cory's book, Little Brother? Yeah. Isn't it awesome?
Yeah.
I want to ask him about that.
Sequel coming out.
What do you want to ask him?
It's called SOPA.
What specifically do you want to ask him about it?
I'd like to see, because SOPA and ACTA and all, there's been a ramp up in these laws. Like, in the book, for those who haven't read it, Patriot Act 2 comes out and, mayhem ensues. And so all these new laws like SOPA and ACTA have come out since he wrote the book, and I wanted to know what his impression of it. Like, if he was to write the sequel, which is an awesome question.
It's an awesome question. Unfortunately, I think our audio is so bad, we're just going to have to bail on this.
Sorry about that.
Hey, Cory, this is
as
David.
always, it worked great in testing.
Yeah, hey, Cory, David Eisenberg. I'd like to thank you very much for giving it a try, and I would like to, I think it's probably not, we're just not getting enough of the flow, so everybody thank Cory for giving it a try. And
sorry about that.
We'll tell our grandchildren, remember when the internet was so flaky that you couldn't do a video call, or an audio call for that matter. I will also put you in touch. Do you know Peter Cochran?
I think so.
Okay, he's a Brit who's managed to get fiber to his own home. You need it too. We'll fix you. I'll take it offline. I'll do my best to make it happen.
Excellent.
You need more of a connection than that. The world needs you to have more of a connection than that. So once again, Cory Doctorow, thank you very much. We really appreciate your giving it a try.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Okay, talk to you later.
All right. So now Sasha and your panel.